Women don't lose respect for men because of money, looks, or status. They lose respect the moment a man abandons his standards just to be loved. The harsh truth, the more desperate a man becomes for validation, the less valuable he appears. And if you stay until the end of this speech, you'll understand why the men women obsess over are usually the ones who can walk away without fear. Most men confuse attention with respect, and that confusion is exactly why they struggle in relationships. Attention is easy to get. A woman can give attention to a man because he looks good, because he entertains her, because he says the right things, or simply because she is bored in the moment. Attention is temporary, emotional, and inconsistent. Respect is different. Respect is deeper. Respect is built slowly, and once it exists, it changes the entire dynamic between a man and a woman. A woman may enjoy attention from many men, but the man she truly values is the one she respects. And the painful reality is that many men sacrifice respect just to keep attention, not realizing they are destroying the very thing that creates lasting attraction. A man who constantly seeks validation becomes emotionally predictable. He starts shaping his personality around pleasing others instead of standing firm in who he is. He becomes afraid to disagree, afraid to set boundaries, afraid to walk away because he believes losing attention means losing value. That fear changes his behavior completely. He begins over-explaining himself, over-texting, over-giving, and over-compensating. Everything he does starts coming from insecurity rather than confidence. Women notice this immediately, even when nothing is said directly. A man who is desperate for attention slowly communicates that he does not believe he is enough on his own. And once a woman feels that desperation, respect begins to disappear silently. Respect comes from emotional strength, not emotional dependency. Women respect men who can control their emotions instead of being controlled by them. A man who stays calm under pressure creates a sense of stability. A man who does not panic when ignored shows confidence. A man who can handle rejection without losing himself demonstrates self-worth. These qualities create a level of admiration that attention alone can never achieve. The reason emotionally disciplined men stand out is because they are rare. Most people react emotionally to everything. They become angry quickly, jealous quickly, insecure quickly, and attached quickly. But a man who remains composed, focused, and grounded creates an energy that feels powerful without needing to force it. Many men think respect is earned through money, status, or physical appearance, but none of those things guarantee admiration. A man can have wealth and still be weak. He can have influence and still tolerate disrespect because he fears being alone. Women can sense when a man lacks internal confidence, regardless of how successful he appears externally. True respect is built through standards. It comes from a man knowing what he will accept and what he will never tolerate. It comes from his ability to protect his peace instead of sacrificing it for temporary affection. The moment a man starts abandoning his values just to keep someone interested, he loses the very thing that made him attractive in the first place. A respected man does not beg for loyalty, attention, or reassurance because his identity is not dependent on external approval. He understands that his value cannot rise or fall based on someone else's feelings toward him. This creates emotional freedom. And emotional freedom changes the way a man speaks, reacts, and carries himself. He no longer chases people who pull away. He no longer tries to convince others to see his worth. He no longer tolerates inconsistent behavior just because he fears losing connection. Instead, he moves with certainty, patience, and discipline. Women may enjoy attention from many men, but they deeply remember the man who respected himself enough to never lose his dignity for temporary validation. One of the biggest mistakes a man can make is believing that love requires him to tolerate everything. Many men are taught that being patient, endlessly understanding, and always available makes them more desirable in relationships. They think sacrificing their boundaries proves loyalty and commitment. But the reality is far more brutal. The moment a man stops protecting his standards, he slowly becomes invisible in the eyes of the woman he is trying to keep. Not invisible physically, but emotionally. His opinions lose weight, his presence loses impact, and his value begins to fade because people naturally respect what has structure, discipline, and limits. When a man accepts everything without resistance, he communicates that he is afraid to lose people, and fear destroys respect faster than failure ever will. Standards are not about arrogance or controlling others. Standards are the foundation of self-respect. They define what a man will tolerate and what he refuses to accept, regardless of how attractive someone may be or how emotionally attached he feels. A man without standards becomes emotionally weak because his decisions are driven by fear instead of principles. He ignores red flags because he wants attention. He stays silent when disrespected because he fears conflict. He keeps giving chances to people who continuously hurt him because he fears abandonment. Over time, this behavior teaches others that his boundaries are meaningless. And once people realize a man has no boundaries, they stop valuing his presence because there is no consequence for mistreating him. Women naturally respect men who can stand firm under emotional pressure, not because women want conflict, but because strength creates security. A man who constantly compromises his values just to avoid losing someone appears unstable. He becomes emotionally dependent on approval, and that dependency changes the balance of the relationship completely. Instead of leading with confidence, he starts negotiating his self-worth through constant sacrifice. He tolerates disrespectful behavior, inconsistent effort, manipulation, and emotional games because he believes endurance will eventually earn love. But the painful truth is that tolerating disrespect never increases attraction. It only lowers a man's value in the eyes of the person disrespecting him. There is a major difference between kindness and weakness, yet many men confuse the two. Kindness comes from strength. Weakness comes from fear. A strong man can be compassionate while still enforcing boundaries. He can care deeply about someone while still walking away when his peace is constantly disturbed. Weak men, however, attach their identity to being needed. They allow people to cross lines repeatedly because they fear rejection more than they value themselves. And once a man starts abandoning his standards to keep someone emotionally close, he slowly loses the ability to command respect anywhere in his life. His confidence weakens, his decisions become emotional, and his entire identity starts revolving around pleasing others rather than staying true to himself. A man with standards understands that not every connection is worth keeping. He knows that loneliness is temporary, but losing self-respect can damage a person for years. This is why emotionally mature men are willing to walk away from situations that compromise their dignity. They do not chase people who constantly disrespect them. They do not beg for consistency, loyalty, or honesty. They observe behavior carefully, and when someone repeatedly violates their boundaries, they create distance without needing revenge or emotional chaos. That ability to detach calmly is powerful because it shows emotional control. It proves that the man values his inner peace more than temporary emotional attachment. Women may test boundaries consciously or unconsciously, but they always notice when a man has the discipline to protect his standards without collapsing emotionally under pressure. One of the most attractive qualities a man can possess is emotional control. Yet it is also one of the rarest qualities in modern relationships. Most people are controlled by their emotions without even realizing it. Their mood changes based on attention, rejection, social media, text messages, or the opinions of others. The moment something does not go their way, they react impulsively. They become angry, needy, defensive, insecure, or emotionally unstable. A man who lacks emotional control becomes predictable because every situation controls him from the outside. Women notice this quickly. They observe how a man responds to stress, conflict, silence, criticism, and disappointment because those moments reveal who he truly is beneath the surface. Attraction is not created only by appearance or words. It is created by emotional energy, and a calm, disciplined man naturally carries an energy that feels safe, powerful, and grounded. Many men mistakenly believe attraction comes from expressing every emotion openly without restraint. A man who remains calm during conflict instantly separates himself from emotionally reactive men. Instead of shouting, begging, blaming, or panicking, he maintains control over his words and actions. This creates mystery and strength because emotional discipline is rare in a world filled with impulsive behavior. Women feel emotionally safer around men who can regulate themselves because emotional chaos creates insecurity. A man who explodes emotionally over every challenge creates tension, instability, and unpredictability. But a composed man creates peace simply through his presence. Emotional control does not mean suppressing emotions or pretending not to care. It means mastering emotions instead of becoming enslaved by them. There is a huge difference between feeling emotions and being controlled by them. Strong men experience pain, disappointment, jealousy, and sadness just like everyone else, but they do not allow those emotions to destroy their judgment or dignity. They process emotions privately, maturely, and with self-awareness. Weak men, however, often seek immediate emotional relief. They react impulsively because they cannot tolerate discomfort. They send angry messages, beg for reassurance, make emotional decisions, or chase validation whenever they feel insecure. Over time, this behavior weakens attraction because instability becomes exhausting. Women are naturally drawn to men who make them feel emotionally secure, and emotional security comes from consistency and discipline. A man who remains grounded during stressful situations communicates strength without needing to say it directly. His calmness becomes reassuring because it shows confidence in himself and in his ability to handle life. He does not crumble under rejection, nor does he become arrogant when praised. His emotional state is not controlled by external approval. That independence creates a powerful presence because it shows he has built internal stability. The men who create the deepest attraction are rarely the loudest or most emotional. They are usually the men who understand themselves deeply enough to remain calm while everyone else loses control around them. One of the biggest reasons many men lose themselves in relationships is because they enter them without purpose. When a man has no direction in life, he naturally begins to make relationships the center of his identity. His emotions become dependent on attention, validation, and approval from women because he has nothing greater pulling his focus forward. Instead of building his future, improving his discipline, or creating something meaningful, he becomes consumed by emotional attachment. Every conversation feels important, every small conflict feels devastating, and every rejection feels like the end of the world because his entire sense of value is tied to whether someone chooses him or not. This is why men without purpose often become emotionally needy. They are searching for fulfillment in relationships that they were supposed to create within themselves first. A man with purpose moves differently. His life does not revolve around constant emotional stimulation because his mind is occupied with growth, ambition, and long-term vision. He wakes up with goals beyond seeking attention from women. He understands that attraction should complement his life, not become the foundation of it. This creates a completely different energy around him. Women notice when a man is deeply focused on becoming better because purpose creates discipline, structure, and confidence naturally. A man who is committed to his mission does not need to force respect from others because his lifestyle already communicates self-control and direction. He values his time, protects his energy, and does not abandon his responsibilities just to chase temporary emotional highs. Many men make the mistake of prioritizing relationships over self-development. The moment they become emotionally attached, they start neglecting their goals, routines, health, and ambitions. Their entire schedule begins revolving around one person. They lose focus on their careers, their physical growth, and even their personal identity because they become addicted to emotional dependence. Over time, this creates imbalance. The relationship stops feeling attractive because the man no longer has his own center. Women may initially enjoy attention, but they rarely admire men who abandon themselves completely in the process of loving someone else. Attraction grows when a man maintains his individuality and continues moving toward his goals regardless of his relationship status. Purpose also creates emotional stability. A man with direction handles rejection differently because his life does not collapse when one person leaves. He may feel pain, disappointment, or sadness, but he still has a mission to return to. His identity remains intact because it was never built entirely around another human being. Men without purpose often become destroyed by heartbreak because they placed all their emotional energy into one connection. When that relationship ends, they feel empty because they were not building anything meaningful outside of it. This is why purpose is so important for masculine strength. It gives a man internal grounding that cannot be easily shaken by emotional situations. Women naturally respect men who are focused on building something greater than immediate pleasure or validation. A man driven by purpose appears emotionally mature because he understands delayed gratification. He knows that discipline matters more than temporary feelings. He is not constantly available, not because he is playing games, but because his life genuinely contains priorities that require his energy and attention. This creates mystery, independence, and value because people are naturally drawn toward individuals who have direction. A man with purpose does not chase endlessly because he knows his worth is connected to what he is becoming, not just who approves of him in the moment. Purpose changes the way a man speaks, thinks, and carries himself. He becomes less reactive, less desperate, and less emotionally dependent because his fulfillment is not entirely external. He understands that relationships are important, but they should never replace self-respect, ambition, or personal growth. The strongest men are not the ones who avoid love entirely, but the ones who refuse to lose themselves inside it because they have built a life that remains meaningful with or without constant validation from others. One of the most misunderstood forms of strength in a man is the ability to walk away from situations that destroy his peace, disrespect his value, or weaken his self-respect. Most people think power comes from control, dominance, or forcing others to stay, but true power is emotional independence. A man who can walk away calmly without begging, chasing, or collapsing emotionally demonstrates a level of self-respect that immediately changes how others perceive him. The problem is that many men are terrified of losing people, so they tolerate behavior that slowly destroys their confidence. They stay in situations where they are ignored, manipulated, lied to, or emotionally drained because they believe holding on is proof of love. In reality, refusing to let go, walking away is difficult because emotional attachment creates fear. Fear of being replaced, fear of starting over, fear of loneliness, fear of not being enough. Most men would rather stay in painful situations than confront these fears directly. They convince themselves that patience will eventually change the other person, or that sacrificing more will finally earn appreciation. But relationships built on one-sided emotional endurance slowly become toxic because imbalance destroys attraction. When one person keeps tolerating everything while the other faces no consequences for harmful behavior, respect disappears naturally. A man who never walks away teaches people that his boundaries are flexible and his standards can be ignored without consequence. The ability to walk away does not come from arrogance or lack of emotion. In fact, emotionally mature men often feel deeply attached before they decide to leave. The difference is that they understand something important. Attachment should never cost self-respect. Strong men know that peace is more valuable than temporary emotional comfort. They recognize when a relationship becomes emotionally unhealthy, and instead of losing themselves trying to fix everything alone, they choose distance over self-destruction. This is not weakness, it is discipline. It takes far more strength to leave something emotionally familiar than to remain trapped inside it out of fear. Women naturally respect men who can detach from unhealthy situations calmly because it demonstrates emotional stability and confidence. A man who can walk away without revenge, chaos, or desperation communicates that his identity is not dependent on one person's approval. He understands his value even when someone fails to recognize it. That mindset creates emotional power because it shows inner security. Men who constantly chase people after rejection often destroy their own dignity, trying to force connection where respect no longer exists. But a man who accepts reality and leaves with composure creates a lasting impression because calm detachment is rare. Walking away also protects a man's mental and emotional energy. Every unhealthy relationship drains confidence slowly. Constant disrespect, manipulation, inconsistency, or emotional games create stress that eventually affects every area of life. A man who refuses to leave toxic situations often loses focus, discipline, and emotional balance because his energy becomes consumed by chaos. But when a man develops the courage to leave what no longer aligns with his standards, he regains control over himself. He begins choosing peace over emotional addiction, dignity over desperation, and self-respect over temporary attachment. The way people treat a man is often a reflection of what he allows, not just what others choose to do. This is why self-respect is one of the most important qualities a man can develop. Without self-respect, a man becomes emotionally available for manipulation, disrespect, and mistreatment because he does not enforce clear standards for how he expects to be treated. Many men complain about being undervalued, ignored, or taken for granted, but they fail to recognize how often they tolerate behavior that slowly destroys their own dignity. The moment a man consistently accepts disrespect without consequences, he teaches others that his boundaries are optional. People naturally observe what behavior they can repeat without resistance, and over time they adjust their treatment based on the standards a man enforces or fails to enforce. Self-respect begins internally before it is ever recognized externally. A man who respects himself understands his worth without needing constant validation from others. He does not beg for attention, approval, or loyalty because his confidence is not entirely dependent on external acceptance. This changes the way he speaks, behaves, and reacts in relationships. He becomes less emotionally desperate because he no longer views losing people as losing himself. Many men tolerate unhealthy behavior because they fear loneliness more than disrespect. They would rather remain in painful situations than face temporary emotional discomfort. But when a man lacks the courage to protect his own dignity, others eventually stop valuing it too. Women especially pay attention to how a man responds when boundaries are tested, not because they enjoy hurting men, but because boundaries reveal emotional strength. If a woman repeatedly disrespects a man and he continuously tolerates it without speaking up or creating distance, she unconsciously learns that his standards are weak. Over time, attraction fades because respect fades first. A man who allows dishonesty, manipulation, inconsistency, or emotional games without consequence communicates insecurity, and insecurity weakens presence. On the other hand, a man who calmly enforces boundaries without emotional chaos demonstrates maturity and confidence. He does not need to yell, threaten, or become controlling. His standards alone create structure because he is willing to leave situations that repeatedly violate his peace. Many men confuse self-respect with ego, but they are completely different. Ego seeks superiority over others, while self-respect seeks alignment with one's own values. A self-respecting man does not need to dominate people emotionally to feel powerful. He simply refuses to betray himself for temporary acceptance. He does not pretend to be someone else to gain approval. He does not overcompensate for attention. He does not chase people who clearly do not value him. His actions are rooted in internal stability rather than emotional fear. This creates a calm confidence that naturally commands respect because authenticity is powerful. People trust and admire individuals who remain consistent in their standards regardless of external pressure. A lack of self-respect often reveals itself through over-tolerance. Men who secretly feel unworthy tend to accept treatment that emotionally healthy people would reject immediately. They justify disrespect, excuse toxic behavior, and continue giving chances long after trust has been broken because they believe enduring pain proves love or loyalty. But repeated tolerance of harmful behavior does not create stronger relationships. It creates imbalance. The more a man abandons his standards to keep someone emotionally close, the more resentment and emotional exhaustion he eventually experiences. Healthy relationships require mutual respect, and mutual respect cannot exist when one person consistently sacrifices their dignity to maintain connection. Self-respect also affects every area of a man's life beyond relationships. It influences the opportunities he accepts, the environments he stays in, the friendships he keeps, and the way he carries himself daily. A man who values himself protects his time, energy, and mental peace carefully because he understands that not everyone deserves unlimited access to him. He learns to say no without guilt. He learns to walk away without hatred. He learns to remain calm under pressure because his confidence comes from knowing he has not betrayed his own values for the sake of temporary validation or emotional dependency,